Hello, everyone. It is Jaime Jo Wright here with Mad Lit Musings podcast. And I'm really excited today. I think it's going to be a fun conversation because I have Chris Fabry with me, and we are here to talk about his new book. Thank you for being on the podcast today.
My pleasure. Boy, I love the pink hoodie. Thank you for wearing that
And the funny thing is, I'm not much of a pink person, but my daughter picked it out, so now I wear it all the time
in honor of her. Yeah.
in honor of her. I probably would have gone with the standard gray, but. Oh man. Well, it's so great to have you here. And your book, Saving Grayson, comes out in November. And wow, it looks like it's packed full of not just story, but a lot of things that people are really going to relate to.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
There's when I sit down to write, I try to mine what's on the inside of me
Mm,
and let that kind of spill on the page. And writing this from the perspective, basically the perspective of an unreliable narrator, a person who doesn't remember what he
right.
doesn't remember,
Yeah.
was a real it was good, but it was hard at the same time. And I enjoyed in the process, even though it was hard. I got to a certain point in the writing where I kind of got stuck, and I realized you're experiencing what the main character is
Mm,
experiencing right now. This
yeah.
frustration of I don't know where to go, I don't know where I am, what's up,
Right.
what's down.
Right. Right. Well, for people who aren't familiar with Saving Grayson, can you give us just a quick overview of what the story is about?
Grayson Hayes is a former writing teacher, English teacher, and writer, author who has early onset Alzheimer's. And the story is basically his wife, Charlotte, he calls Lottie. Lottie is helping him deal with his life while at the same time juggling all of the plates that are going on. She's decided that they have to move from where they are and they go into a new place that will be better for both of them and help her corral him better. And so they're at this point of, they say, write about people who are in terrible trouble. That's Rick
Right.
Bragg said that. Great stories are about
Right.
people in trouble. And so Grayson is in trouble, but he doesn't really know that he's in trouble. He doesn't
Mhm.
know the entire fix that he's in
Mhm.
or what everybody is trying to do around him. So he thinks he needs to go back to his childhood home to solve a murder mystery. There's someone, he has this recurring dream that there's someone back there who has died and needs justice. And that's what he's writing. That's what his greatest book is going to be. So his desire is to go back there, and Charlotte has to come up with a way to let him do this
Mm.
while at the same time everything is going on in her life. So
Yeah.
it's a journey basically.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And it hits close to home for me because I think I mentioned before we went on air, my dad has early onset Alzheimer's, and everything you just said is so true. There's like this cacophony of people moving around him, and he's sort of in a world of everything's fine. I'm better than I've ever been before, and
Right.
not really understanding that he's told me the same thing 6 times in the last 5 minutes and those types of things.
Right. Well, and I've been reading the audiobook version of this, and
Mhm.
just today Lottie, as they're in bed at night, Lottie says to him, Grayson, why won't you let me love you?
Mm,
Because she's trying to take care of him. His doctor is trying to take care of him, and he rebuffs all of this because he's in his own story. He's in what
right.
he can understand and what he can see. And everybody knows that and wants to give him, that. But the thing, and this is where it takes it away from Alzheimer's, the thing about Grayson is, as I was writing the story, is he wants to control his own life. He writes, so he controls everything in the stories
Hmm.
through the years. He wants to control things, and he wants to be able to love and provide for Lottie, for his family, but he doesn't understand that it's Grace that is coming alongside him. And it is Grace. You have to allow Grace in rather than earning something. And
Mm,
he's trying so hard to earn the respect and the love and the admiration of the people around him. And I think, looking back at my own life, I feel the same way, that there is I say I believe in grace, I believe in God's grace, but how much do I, if I make a mistake, beat myself up because,
Mm,
well, God doesn't love me now because I made a
right,
mistake. And
right.
I don't see it from, his perspective. Grayson is dealing with that same kind of thing with the people around him and ultimately with God too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you think about those memories that are also plaguing him that are kind of shadows in his mind, really, with this murder that he's wanting to go back and resolve. And there's an element, if I dare to compare to him in real life, where I my dad has always been the protector, the fixer, the one that takes care. And now he's, I can see with this story where Grayson's kind of like, this is kind of like his last hurrah to fix something for someone. Am
Yes.
I right in hearing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what gives him the feeling. The greatest feeling that he has in life is writing the stories that he writes to get in
Yeah.
the flow. And the disease has taken that away from him.
Mhm.
And so being able to physically go back and get into the river, I mean, that's what he wants to do, go back and go fishing in the hills where he grew up. That is what is going to comfort him. And it's that desire that he keeps coming back to. And the logical question is, well, how does he remember that? How does he know that? He keeps this journal in his yellow legal pad. He writes
Mhm.
everything out on the legal pad, and he refers to this, and he goes back to it, and that's what he lives his life from, is the own thoughts that he's able to jot down and remember, that jog his memory. So you see him constantly going back to this Bible of sorts, this yellow
Yeah.
legal pad that he writes on, that gives him comfort, that gives him direction. And that becomes a real huge part of the story. So let me ask you a personal question,
Yeah, go
Jamie.
for it.
What is the toughest part then? They call this the long goodbye.
Yeah.
From where you are right now, what's the deepest struggle that you have?
Oh, that's a great question. For me right now, it's the anticipation of knowing what I'm going to have to do in the difficult conversations. It's the anticipation of knowing that probably, in the next year or so, I'm going to have to sit down with my dad and be like, "Hey, I know you feel this way, but here's what we're seeing, and you living alone isn't going to kick it anymore." And how do you tell somebody that? It's like taking away their freedom
Yes.
for their safety, but yeah, not
You
looking forward
know,
to it.
my mom passed away a year ago, August,
Mm,
and she was 95. Um, my dad was 91 when he passed away. So I've got, these pretty good genes,
yeah.
long life genes. But she didn't have Alzheimer's, but she had a dementia that made it unsafe for her to live
Mhm.
alone. And that was her desire to the
Yeah.
end, was, I want to be where I want to be.
Right.
And you're not going to put me in, that
Right.
place over there. So she had a fall in December before she died. She had a fall, and I think she realized, she knew, this can't go on this way.
Yeah.
And my brother, I have two older brothers, both married. So all of us got together and we had the talk with her, like you're
Mhm.
talking about. And on the phone, my sister in law calls me the mama whisperer. On the phone, I had this conversation with her, and I said, Mama, what? And I just kind of laid it out. I said, I am so scared, so worried about you. I can't go to sleep at night thinking about where you are, where you've
Mhm.
fallen, you've hit your head or whatever. And it was a couple of days after Christmas, and she said, the dam broke, and she said, well, would I be able to go in after New Year's?
Mm.
She had agreed. It's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, yeah, sure, we can do it.
Yeah.
It's like, I'll take anything.
Right.
And after New Year's, she moved in. She was there into this assisted living place. She just later on, she had all these people that she knew and that she talked with, that
Oh,
came in and cleaned her room and everything,
right.
and brought her food. But she said, like 2 weeks afterward, I called her. She always wanted me to call her on Sunday because she said, "Don't call me on Saturday. I'm busy." She had nothing to do.
I love
So
that.
I called her on Sunday mornings, and she said, I think this is the best decision I've ever made.
Oh,
So
I
I
love
pray
that.
that for your dad. I
Yes.
pray that he will be able to see, and be able to get over
Mhm.
that hump,
Mhm.
But there's no guarantee, even if you get over the hump, that
Right.
he'll understand that or embrace it.
Or remember that we got over the hump.
Yeah.
There's been several times we've had to go over a big hump more than once because he doesn't remember the conversation that we'd already had. And so you're just like you want to have those big conversations and then take instant action
Right.
because you're like, if we wait
Exactly.
3 months, we got to do this all over again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, what made you, I shouldn't say want, but what steered you in the direction of writing a story with a primary character who's essentially losing his memories and losing his mind?
I think that it was a challenge to me. Focus on the family who contracted the book,
Hmm.
wanted some stories that had some kind of social something that was going on in society that
Right.
families were grappling with.
Right.
And I went away from all of the huge events out there, and I went small. I like to go micro because I think life is lived from the micro to the macro.
Hmm.
And I think this unreliable narrator of Grayson just really called to me. The other thing that happened about this time was I had a friend, and online they said they were selling the car, and my daughter needed a car. And so we've known this family from Colorado. They had moved to Tucson, where I live, and we went over there. And I was talking with his wife about, well, how much do you want? And, get all the things together. And I heard my friend in the living room say to my wife, Andrea, this Alzheimer's thing that they tell me that I have is. And I looked up at his wife and her mouth dropped and she said, he never talks about this to other people. He
Wow.
never exposes this thing that's
Right.
gone on.
Right.
And so I learned that my pal Jim, who loved to fish and do everything, was on the front end of this Alzheimer's. And I
Hmm.
began to process that for our friendship, the things that we wouldn't get to do anymore, the conversations that we wouldn't have on the phone. They have since moved to Texas. And just that, that longing for what was
Hmm.
and what won't be,
Right.
but what is.
Mm.
Because I around Thanksgiving I called him and he said, "Hello, Chris." And I thought, well, he still remembers me. He still does. He's, yeah, I was talking with somebody the other day who heard your radio program and this, blah, 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 blah. And he said, that Chris, he is one of the three best friends I've ever had in my life.
Oh,
And I thought, thank you, God.
yeah.
Thank you for that little sliver of, in his memory, he was able to grab a hold of that. And
Hmm.
it was just this light that and grace and thanksgiving that came over me. But I don't, his daughter is getting married later this year, and I don't know what that's going to be like. I don't
Right.
know what's going to happen. So it was all that inner struggle and turmoil that I felt like I really need to write about this, since I feel like even I'm distanced, I feel like I'm walking through
You're
this
still experiencing part of
myself.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It is a really poignant thing, and it's also something I kind of equate. So I had 3 miscarriages before I ever had my children. And in a
Mm,
sense, I equate, and it doesn't, it probably won't match in most people's minds, but I equate miscarriages similarly to how I'm feeling about Alzheimer's now. It's kind of a private grieving, and
yes.
not private because you want it to be that way, but because people on the outside don't see. Dad isn't in a hospital bed. There's no IVs hooked up to him. There's not a terminal cancer hanging over his head. And it's the same thing with miscarriages. You're expecting a child and then you're not, and it's usually early, so most people don't even realize. And you just go on, and so you kind of feel like you're on this solo journey, and only the people that are closest with you understand this grieving process that you're trying to maneuver through while living life as though nothing's wrong.
Right. And you navigate, and you have to navigate it alone. You
Yeah.
navigate it with, the people that are around you that care about you. But like you say, they can't know. And that's where you get into the whole compare despair thing. And if
Hmm.
I compare my pain or my grief to yours or anybody else's, I can always find somebody who's in a worse situation or in a better
Right.
situation. And that's the power of lament, I think, is
Mm.
just saying, and bringing that to God. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm going through. This is the loss. Here's the dream I had. It's not going to be,
Right.
and I need to struggle well with that. And so my wife Andrea we have 9 children,
Okay.
and so in the middle of that process, she had a miscarriage.
Hmm.
And so much from the outside was, well, you have your children or you
Right.
have all these kids, and
Yep.
you can have another child, all the things that are said in love,
Right.
but that injure even more, that
Hmm.
kind of tell you, push down this feeling that you're having. Don't enter into that. And I think what you're saying and what I try to write about is pain is where we get our most growth
Yeah.
and our and we become real
Yeah.
through, like the Velveteen Rabbit. We become
Oh,
real through the pain of our lives.
yeah.
So thanks for making that point.
Yeah. Well, you said Velveteen Rabbit, and my insides just melted. That was like one of my favorite stories when I was a kid. And because of that book, I still have all my stuffed animals too, I have to say, because they
Oh,
are all real.
yes,
So
exactly.
they're in the closet behind me. Now everybody knows my secrets, but
It came out today.
it
Isn't that
did.
great?
It's out. Expose with Chris Fabry, Jaime Jo Wright, the deep dark secrets. But no, I think it's interesting too, because as you're talking about the grief and everything, there's that element with a miscarriage where, as a mother, I felt like my child's life was devalued with comments like, "Oh, you can have another one," or etc. And in a sense, I almost feel like that happens with the Alzheimer's too. Like, well, you had a great life with your dad. Well, his life isn't over, and I have to navigate this part of his life with him. I have to adjust, realign my purpose. And it's like sometimes you feel like people, I don't want to say people on the outside, but people on the outside, they're like, oh, Alzheimer's, door closed, it's over. And it's not. He's still my dad, but he's a totally different person in so many ways.
Yes. And that's the struggle that you also see with Charlotte, is
Okay.
Grayson's wife,
Hmm.
where she realizes, look, the life is not going to look the way that we thought it was going to look. So how do I deal with this?
Right.
So she has to make the decisions about the house, where they're going to move, where they're going to live, what's going to happen. And she has all this, the idyllic place for them to go where he can actually fish if he wants to,
Yep.
because Grayson grew up in the hills, and it's in an area where there's a little lake nearby, and he can have his desk and he can do whatever writing he still can do if he wants to do that. And they've got their dog, DuBose, who comes along with them. But even then, she sees what a struggle it is, and
Hmm.
what she hopes for life keeps falling away, keeps
Hmm.
crumbling in front of her. And she's got to embrace not what she hopes will be, but what is here today. And that's a continual daily process, because you will get, glimpses of, you've seen this with people even in late stage Alzheimer's, who will hear music and
Right.
who will begin to sing,
Yeah.
and it'll be like it's themselves, and then go right back again,
Yep.
go quiet, go silent. And so it's just embracing whatever glimmer or glimpse of sunlight you can each day.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you write the story and you're having a main character who's kind of an unreliable source, and dealing with some, obviously, we haven't even gotten into the concept that there's a murder in the book, but my ears perk up there. That's my nature, right? I'm like, oh, murder, yay. So he's got some trauma. Obviously, he's going back to revisit in his mind. So you have this whole story world that you've built, which is a parallel to real life, with a lot of brokenness and a
Yes.
lot of pain and a lot of fear of what's yet to come. So, how do you, as a writer and author, um, pull in the saving elements and the hope and bring in, those that I'm huge on that with my books. Like I have dark, 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 and then there's a pinprick of hope. What does that mean in your story?
Well, I think, and this was my fear about writing about this,
Hmm.
that it would be stigmatized as, oh, that's the Alzheimer's novel.
Right.
And it is, it is about, it has to be, but it's really not. It's really a book about love and
Mm,
what love can do in a person's life, in a person's heart, to everybody, because that's the other thing about this disease. It's not just the person who has it, it's everybody around them and the way that they deal with it and the ecosystem
yeah.
that comes with that. So I think the way that I get to the hope is fully jumping into the pool that Grayson is swimming in, and to show you the confusion. And there's a moment where at least I hope the reader will say, no, no, don't do that. Because Grayson makes a decision about what he's going to do right at that moment, that the reader knows, whoa, hang on, if you do that, that's going to change and he does it.
Mm,
And so through that, then you see the love and the care and the concern, not only for those people that are around Grayson, but also people on the periphery who, I'll give you a hint, the place where he's going back to, people don't like him there.
uh,
They don't want him there, and
okay.
there's good reason for that,
Hmm.
because Grayson was not the person he thought he was
Okay.
back there with all those people. And so you see the danger. Charlotte says, you have to be careful, Grace. If you go back there, you got to be careful. As the reader is asking, why would he need to be careful? So all of that is mixed in for the reader to. I believe in writing a story where the reader has a job,
Mm,
that I'm not just having you read this so that you get the information and you follow the story and you get to the end of oh, that's what happened.
right.
You are a participant in the
Mm,
story, and you are part of it. You're trying not only to figure out what happened to Grayson way back where, but where then, as you read, how am I like Grayson? How am
yeah.
I like Charlotte? How am I like, he goes back and he sees this old friend of his, Pooch, that he asks this question. He wants him to do something, and Pooch just, he's aghast at this. Why would you want me to do that? You are a part of that story, each step of the way. And at
Mm,
least I hope that's what happens to
yeah.
anybody who reads it.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I love about fiction, because my brain does not do well with just reading a nonfiction book, sitting down and, here we go, we're going to go through this. Um, but if I sit down with a fiction novel that has meat and message interwoven, I become swept away with the characters. And at the end, I feel like part of my spirit or soul has shifted a little bit in a direction. And so I think that sounds like this book is one of those that's going to happen to.
Yes. I've got a quote. I think it's over here. I think I keep it in my Bible. Here it is. This is by my pal Ernest, who's back there. My
Oh
son
yeah.
did that for me. Ernest Hemingway said this: a writer's problem does not change. He himself changes, and the world he
Mhm.
lives in changes, but his problem remains the same. It is always how to write truly, and having found what is true, to project it in such a way that it becomes part of the experience of the person who reads it.
Mm,
And I think the books that made the most difference in me did
yeah.
that very thing. Like the book that I remember that did that for me earliest on, as far as a novel for adults, was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay. Yeah.
And I read this as a teenager, and as I read it, I wasn't reading about Scout and Jen. I was in that tree. I was looking down at Dill Baker Harris. I was
Hmm.
in, I went with Jem and Scout to the church with Calpurnia. You're a
Right.
part of it.
Right.
And so when the loss comes with Tom Robinson, and it's returned that he was guilty, it's like, this is not, you feel the same thing that the
Yeah.
characters feel, if not more so.
Right.
And so what I want to happen here, and that's one of the reasons why the dog is named DuBose.
Okay.
Remember, Mrs. DuBose in the novel was the woman who was addicted to laudanum, and she'd have
Mhm.
Jem come over because he messed up her flowers, camellias, I think, and he'd come over and read to her. and then she'd fall asleep, and he and Scout would leave. Well, Atticus, after she dies, Atticus says it was her last wish to get off of laudanum. She didn't want to be beholden to anybody, and she did that. And she used you, and your reading to her that helped her.
Mm-hmm.
And Jem learns then that even with the court case with Tom Robinson, that even when you're licked, even when you know you're licked before you start, you still do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's why Dubose is called Dubose in the novel, this dog that goes along with Grayson, because Grayson's licked before we start the
Yeah.
story. He's
Yeah.
got Alzheimer's. There's
Yeah.
nothing left here for him. But the grace of God is moving through his story, and you see by the end the worth of his life, because he simply lets that grace come through to him and then goes through him.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I love how God can work through circumstances that don't look like they're going to be good ones. And then all of a sudden there's those blessings intermingled and ways that you're like, wow, God actually did something cool with that,
Yes.
I love that. Love that.
When we are weak, he is strong.
Yeah,
It's our
exactly.
weakness. You think of Paul, I think of this all the time with Paul, and what a great orator he was,
Mm-hmm.
and how he wanted to be out there and speaking with people and evangelizing and building the churches and all this. And he's he's shackled, he's in prison, he's next to this person, he can't do anything. So he does the only thing he can do is just write.
Yeah.
And aren't you glad he did? Aren't
I'm
you
really
glad he
glad
was
you did. That's
faithful?
the
Yeah.
one nonfiction book I can actually get through. I should clarify that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do. When I was a kid, I remember hearing that verse, for when I am weak, then I am strong. And I'm just like, what? It made no sense to my little brain. But now as I've gotten older, it's funny, as I get older, I feel so much weaker. I always thought when I was little, I could grow up and I would never be afraid. Like, I want to grow up and then I won't be afraid of anything anymore and I'll be really strong. And it seems like the older I get, the weaker I get and the
Hmm.
more aware of my weakness I become.
Yes.
But on the flip side, that faith then of something to lean on that's so much stronger and even inexplicable is
Well,
really
isn't it the
comforting.
same? Is it the same with writing? Each
Yeah.
time I start a project, it's like, I don't know how to do this. Am I
Mm-hmm.
going to be able to do this again?
Mm-hmm.
When are people going to see that I can't, I
Right. I
really
know
don't
every
have anything to
manuscript I
say?
turn into my editor, I'm like, here's my career ending novel. Please have fun. It's
Exactly.
done. This is it. I know.
But it's almost as if God has woven it in such a way that if you're looking for a superpower, it's weakness.
Yeah.
give that give that part of you to him, and let him work rather than you striving to do
Mm-hmm.
everything, and something good's going to happen.
That should be like a book. Like my brain, how you're a writer and all of a sudden something starts going, oh, I'm picturing all
Yeah,
kinds of things.
maybe it will
I
be
like that.
one of these days. Let's
Superpower of
co-write it.
weakness. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. That would be an interesting mishmash of genre right there. Chris, this has been an absolute blessing to have you here. The book is called Saving Grayson. It releases November 6th of 2023. And it is available for pre-order right
Yep,
now. And
absolutely.
pre-orders are a great way to get the book, because then if you're like me, you don't forget to order it. You just do it now and then it pops in your mailbox and you're like, wow, that was great. Or you do like me where you pre-order it 3 times because you didn't know you
You
pre-ordered it
forgot
the
that you
time
did. Yeah.
before, and then you get 3 copies, and you're like, "Oh, okay." Oh, fun. But if readers want to find out more about you, you have a whole backlist of great novels, great books. You've also got a radio show and different things like that. What do you want our readers to know about you as far as finding you?
Just go to Chris Fabry, if you can spell Fabry, Fabry, chrisfabry.com. It has a list of things. You can
Love it.
link to the radio show there, and find out more. But I really thinking about your dad, Jamie.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking, as we wrap up here, and anybody who's dealing with this in their family or extended family or friends, that you will find grace in the middle for today,
Mhm.
because that's all we have. We don't
Yeah.
have tomorrow. It's not guaranteed. Just today. It's all we need. I love the Lord's Prayer, give me the food I need today,
Mhm.
daily bread. And so the daily grace in order to move forward. I pray that for you and anybody
Mm.
else who's going through this.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being willing to write some of the hard stuff so that those of us who are going through it can find the encouragement and hope that Christ gives us. So it's a great honor. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. God bless you, Jamie.